You should know that my parents have been separated for as long as I can remember. From the age of 4 to 17. I'm 18 now. I lived with my dad. He's a painter and decorator by trade, but he also has this unusual passion for buying old, dilapidated houses and renovating them completely. These houses were always neglected, forgotten, and falling apart. Basically, the kinds of places you'd expect to see in a horror movie. When I was about 7 or 8, he bought one of the creepiest houses I've ever seen. It was completely untouched, almost frozen in time.
I can't believe how cheap we got this place. The agent said it's been empty for almost 10 years. Can you believe that? She said the old tenants just up and left one night, and nobody has seen them since.
The previous owners had left everything behind: furniture, decorations, even personal items. My dad saw it as a goldmine of potential. I just thought it was creepy as hell. The house had a strange layout. The main living space was entirely on the ground floor. The upper floor, which should have been bedrooms or living areas, was more like an attic. It stretched across the top of the house like a long rectangle, divided into rooms. From left to right, there was my room, then the office, the stairs in the middle, and on the far right, the bathroom and my dad's room. At first, I didn't mind the place. My room was okay, though I couldn't understand why it was full of porcelain dolls. These weren't the cute kind of dolls you'd buy for a kid. They were old, cracked, and lifeless. Their painted eyes seemed to follow you wherever you went. Even at that age, I knew they weren't right. I got rid of most of them within the first few days, but for some reason, I kept one. It sat on the windowsill, staring blankly into the room. One night, I had a nightmare. The doll came to life. In my dream, it slowly turned its head toward me, climbed down from the windowsill, and walked to my bed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. It reached out, and just as it was about to touch me, I woke up in a cold sweat. I was so terrified that I refused to sleep in that room again. From that point on, I slept in a makeshift bed in the office. My dad thought I was just being a scared little kid, but he didn't argue much. He had plenty of work to do and probably figured it wasn't worth the fight.
You slept in the office again last night, huh?
Yeah, that old doll in my room. There's something weird about it. It creeps me out.
You mean the free doll that came with the house? It's just a doll. You're letting your imagination run wild, kiddo.
Yeah, well, you don't have to fall to sleep with that thing watching over you.
Even though I avoided sleeping there, I still went into the room during the day to play. That's when things got weird. At first it was subtle. I'd hear faint whispers, like someone calling my name. Then I started noticing shadows moving in the corners of the room. Just quick flickers, like something darting out of sight. It was unnerving, but I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. The strange occurrences didn't stop there. Sometimes I'd find the doll in different positions. Once it was lying on its side, even though I was sure I'd left it sitting upright on the windowsill. Another time it was on the floor, halfway across the room. I told my dad, but he brushed it off, saying I must have knocked it over. But I knew I hadn't touched it. This went on for a few years until we finally moved out. Once we left, the strange experiences stopped completely. I didn't think about the house or the doll much after that. At least, not until a family gathering when I was 16 or 17. We were sitting around after dinner, and I overheard my dad talking to my uncle and a close family friend, who I'll call Paul. They were reminiscing about the old house, specifically the time they all stayed there during the renovations.
So you're saying this, the
Whatever happened to you in that old house of mine? I'm not sure those dolls took too kindly to our handiwork.
My uncle, who's an electrician, and Paul, who's also in construction, had helped my dad with the work. They were talking about one particular night when they all decided to tell scary stories before bed. My dad slept in his bedroom, my uncle stayed in the office, and Paul slept in what used to be my room. The next morning, Paul woke up looking shaken. He told them he'd had a horrible dream. In the dream, the doll on the windowsill came to life. It climbed down and walked over to his bed. He tried to get away, but it grabbed him and started clawing at his chest. As Paul recounted this story, my dad and uncle went pale. They didn't say anything at first, just stared at him. Then one of them pointed out the scratches all over Paul's chest. He hadn't been wearing a shirt and his torso was covered in red marks, long, thin, like claw marks. When my dad told this story, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Paul had no idea about my nightmare or the strange things I'd experienced in that room. Yet his dream was almost identical to mine. And those scratch marks, that was something I never experienced, thank God. But hearing it made my skin crawl. I sat there frozen as my dad, uncle, and Paul moved on to other topics. They didn't seem to notice how much their story had affected me. For them, it was just a creepy memory from years ago. But for me, it was a confirmation of something I'd always tried to dismiss as childhood imagination. It's been over a decade since I first lived in that house, and I still think about it sometimes. I wonder if there was something about that doll, something tied to the house or the people who lived there before us. I've never been able to explain what happened, but one thing's for sure. I'll never look at porcelain dolls the same way again.